Access to Democracy is made possible by donations from the following organizations. Thomson Reuters, a global company with expertise and insight to unravel complex situations in the areas of law, tax, compliance, government, and media. Their worldwide network of journalists and editors keep customers up to speed on relevant global events. Thomson Reuters, the answer company. The division championship Minnesota Twins are looking to go all the way to the World Series in 2024. Bolstered by inspirational shortstop Carlos Correa, a healthy Brian Buxton, and rookie phenom Royce Lewis, plus a pitching staff led by Pablo Lopez and an outstanding bullpen featuring Johan Duran, the Twins are the best bargain in the major leagues, and Target Field is the best venue in baseball. Sheridan Dulas & Kins, PA, a family and criminal defense law firm, has been serving clients in Dakota County and throughout Minnesota for over 40 years. Ranked a Tier 1 Best Law Firm by U.S. News and World Report every year since 2009, Sheridan Dulas & Kins are here to help you in your most difficult life circumstances. Established in 2007, 45th Parallel Spirits was among the first 50 micro-distilleries in the United States. Based in New Richmond, Wisconsin, all aspects of production occur at our facility. If you're interested in visiting and learning more about the 45th Parallel Distillery, please check our website and plan a visit to tour our facility and taste our spirits. Truestone Financial, with locations in Minnesota and Wisconsin, has proudly served its members since 1939. Truestone engages, educates, and supports its members to ensure they have the tools to empower their financial well-being. Truestone Financial, your neighborhood credit union. Learn more at truestone.org.
Hello and welcome to Access to Democracy. Thank you for joining us. I'm Bill Raker, your host for this edition of the program. We're welcoming back today a returning guest, Jay Haapala with AARP Minnesota. Jay, welcome back again to Access to Democracy.
Yeah,
it's always a pleasure to have you. You have so interesting things to share with us. And on this program, we're going to be talking about how communities can be livable for all ages, or something along the lines of that theme.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So Jay, I know you've talked to us before about AARP, but before we get into today's theme, tell us a little bit about what AARP is, what its mission is, and then how that feeds in to the topic we're going to be discussing.
Sure thing. So at AARP, we work on behalf of all people age 50 and over in the United States. We have an office in all 50 states and even in Puerto Rico and the U.S. Virgin Islands, where our staff and volunteers work together on a variety of issues. So if people have seen AARP, the magazine, they know that we work on a wide variety of different issues that have to do with people's financial security, has to do with people's access to health care and being able to afford their health care and their medications. And increasingly, it has to do with creating local communities that are supportive for older residents, because as we know, today people are living longer. We have a big generation of baby boomers who are between the ages of about 60 and 80 right now. And our infrastructure in a lot of places just hasn't kept pace, or it hasn't been able to evolve as quickly as people's needs and preferences have evolved as we're growing older as a demographic and a population.
So the infrastructure that you're talking about, that you referred to, is the infrastructure of our communities, our cities, our counties, and the places where we live. Mm-hmm. So many of our viewers know that AARP is nonpartisan, non-political. We don't get involved in contributing to political candidates or political parties or PACs. And it's the largest membership organization, I think, in the country. Do you happen to know approximately the number of members here in Minnesota as well as nationally?
Sure. There's about 620,000 people who are members in Minnesota, and then it gets up to around 36 or 37 million nationwide. So we represent many people over the age of 50 across the country, and that gives us a lot of influence and power with decision makers, so we capitalize on that and make sure we're representing people very well. But it also gives us the opportunity to do a lot of market research. So when I've said already, talking about people's needs and preferences when it comes to their communities, where they live, this is based on our research about what people really say either they want or they have or they depend on, or on the opposite is what they don't have and they'd like to see improved.
So tell us a little bit more about what's happening to our demographics. Let's dive a little deeper into that, because that really sets the stage or the foundation for this initiative that AARP is a big supporter of.
Yeah, I'll bet most people watching right now understand the concept of our generations, and that after World War II, all the soldiers came home and people had a lot of children. So that created the baby boomer generation. We have that group of people right now who number in the 60 or 70 million across the country. So it's a huge group of people, and they are between the ages of about 60 and about 80 right now. And at the same time that we have this big generation, more and more people are living longer and longer. So we are really, as a country, growing older, and that's a good thing. But it also means we have to adjust to that reality that we have more older adults in our country today than ever before. And I'll say too, because I had this sort of misconception that once the baby boomers are gone, then we'll have a population decline, but that's not even the case at all. The millennial generation, people between the ages of about 25 and the early 40s right now, that's a big generation too. And we're all, going to keep on living longer. So AARP is working on these issues and trying to make sure that our leaders and decision makers are adjusting to the reality of an older demographic.
Well, that's something that's going to get a lot more attention as time goes by. And this initiative, this program that AARP is really behind, is called Livable Communities, right? So tell us, what is a livable community in this context?
Sure. So it's really a response to the fact that our infrastructure, so the built environment, the roads and the houses, the public places, whether it's parks or Main Street sidewalks, those were built, they're repaired and renovated all the time, but the structure was really built a long time ago. And so it wasn't built for the realities of the way our citizenry is today. It's about the social environment. So how do our communities, our cities, our local governments really engage with their residents? How are older people who are working longer today participate in the workforce for longer if they choose to or if they need to? So it's that social dynamic and the organizations that operate in communities. Of course, during the COVID pandemic, we realized just the public health importance of having social inclusion and avoiding social isolation for a lot of people, but we have to work very hard these days to make sure that ourselves and our neighbors and our loved ones don't become socially isolated, so that's a part of it. And it's also the service environment. So it's the health care that people need, the social services that people need, and also the communication that people need, not unlike what your television program does for people. It gives them the information that they need.
Well, that's why we're having you here as a guest, Jay, to tell us about this. So this really is a comprehensive and a complex program that is available for communities, cities, counties, any type of local governmental structure, I suppose, to help analyze, understand, and prepare for the kinds of changes that this shifting demographics is requiring now and is going to require more of in the future. It's transportation, it's housing, it's medical facilities, it's all of those things that you enumerated. So there are already communities here in Minnesota who've signed up for this and they're participating in it. How many are there right now?
There are currently 23 local communities, whether they are cities and towns or counties, that have enrolled in the AARP network of age-friendly communities. So AARP, we are the United States affiliate for the World Health Organization's global network of age-friendly communities. There are about 850 of these places across the country, from New York City and Los Angeles to small towns and everywhere in between. And in Minnesota, we have 23 local communities and counties that have joined the network. They are in various stages of a 5-year cycle, where, as you started to say, they assess the issues. They engage the residents. They get together between the elected officials and the leaders and the residents, and they identify the issues. So where can they make improvements to create a better community that's inclusive and supportive of the older residents? They create an action plan, and over a period of time, a 5-year cycle, they implement the action plan. At the end of the cycle, they evaluate their progress. And most communities, when they get through that 5-year cycle of making improvements, they'll start the process over again with a new assessment to see 5 years later where are the new opportunities to make improvements and uncover new issues and continue moving forward. And I'll say the process is designed to be flexible. So as we came through the coronavirus pandemic, you don't have to look much farther than that to find a great example of how these age-friendly communities were able to shift in their action plans and really address the very pressing needs that people had in those communities. And we've been able to collect stories about how they were able to do it more effectively because they had been engaging with the older adults in those places. They were just connected and they knew where to find people that were particularly vulnerable and had needs.
So it's interesting to hear that this program is all the way from a local town or community, national here in the United States, and global as well. So it is far-reaching.
And it's on the state level as well. So Governor Walz in the state of Minnesota, we've been working with them. The state of Minnesota is enrolled in the AARP network as well. There's some structure. There are staff who work within the Department of Human Services, and they're building their action plan. And in fact, already the legislature has made available millions of dollars in grants that go to local communities for their age-friendly projects, whether it's that assessment to understand the issues, or whether it's once the community has a project that they'd like to implement, this is how they can do that. And again, those projects then are focused, it could be on the built environment, housing projects, transportation projects, parks projects, social programs to get people connected, or those communication and services type projects that meet the people's needs where they have them.
Well, I know that there is a legislative task force on aging here in Minnesota, and I hope to have a guest from that group here on the program at some point in the future. Yeah. We talked about age-friendly, and I want people to be sure that they understand that when we say that, we're not just talking about people over 50 or people who are retired or people who are older. We're talking about people of all ages.
People of all ages, that's for sure. However, what I need to point out is that when communities or just about anyone is going about their planning processes, it's oftentimes the older residents who get left out. Yeah. We're talking about how to support young children and families. We're trying to talk about how do we create a better environment for business. And the older residents are often left feeling, well, where do I fit into these community development projects? A lot of times, people who work for cities, people who work in community development, they're very well trained, they're smart, they know about the importance of engaging with their older residents and people of all ages in their community. We can help bring the older adults to the table. So that's what AARP can provide, as a way that older adults are participating in those projects. But at the same time, like you said, when you build sidewalks that are accessible for older people, you're also making communities that are easier to navigate and more comfortable and accessible for young children, families, and everyone else.
So it's just so easy from the way you're describing this to us to see how important this is and why we need to be focusing on it and putting attention and resources towards it. And here is a perfect example of where AARP saw a need and saw an opportunity and stepped in and said, we're going to see that what we can do to move this forward. Mm-hmm. So if there's someone listening to our program today who has a real interest in what you're talking with us about, Jay, and they say, hey, I think the community that I live in, wherever it may happen to be, should be a part of this, so we should look into this. So, Jay, tell us how that process works.
Sure, glad to do that. And that's all. I couldn't hope for anything more than some people watching the program to think, well, we could do this in my community where we live. And it can really start with one person, I guess, just like there are sayings about that, you know, a committed group of small people can change the world. But taking that first step, you know, our website is easy to find. If you just go to aarp.org/age-friendly or /livable communities, you'll find a ton of research, a ton of resources that people can use, from learning how to take the first steps and organize a group of people with your neighbors, to how to go to your city council members and perhaps your mayor and local government and start educating them about the issues. And we're here through the AARP Minnesota State Office to help in this process too. But getting a group of people, a group of stakeholders together, learning about the issues, learning about the process, getting buy-in from the elected officials, which is a part of that process. There's a brief application that gets filed with AARP. We generally approve it, and then that community becomes a member in the AARP network. I think I've alluded to this throughout, but it's not a stamp of approval. We're not labeling the community as one of the top 10 places to retire in Minnesota, but instead it's a recognition of the commitment by residents, the commitment by local leaders to understand and include older residents and to make improvements that benefit everyone.
So the way I understand this is that even though AARP is a huge supporter and provides all kinds of support and resources for this program, AARP is not going to go to the city council or the mayor in Eagan, I'll use that as an example where I live, and say, hey, Eagan City Council, what are you doing to make Eagan an age-friendly community? It's up to someone who lives in that community, like me, to go to the mayor or go to the city council and say, tell me what's the plans, what are you doing that would make Eagan continually making progress towards being an age-friendly Minnesota. That's how the process starts, right?
Yes, we definitely want local people to be taking the lead. We're here to support people 100% with the resources that we have to help them achieve these type of goals. But we definitely want local people involved in that. And then, too, I guess you brought up something that reminded me. Of course, places like Eagan and other communities across the state are already doing good work to include their older residents and serve all their residents. And if they're looking for a way to sort of package all that work and make sure that the residents understand all that they're doing for the older residents, this is one way to achieve that. And just to get additional help. And by the way, to tell the story about how great it is to live in Eagan because they've made this commitment to their older residents and being inclusive for everyone.
Jay, let's take just a minute to do a little sales training for our audience, because I know we've got some viewers out there who are going to see this, are going to listen to this and say, hey, I want to do something to follow through. I'm going to go talk to the mayor in my community or a member of the city council that I know. What kinds of objections or kinds of questions is this person going to encounter when they make that approach?
Yeah, first let me talk about a few of the benefits that I like to list. One is the alignment. So there are these 23 other communities in Minnesota. I don't want to list them all, but it's where about a third of the population lives. So a lot of the big communities from Duluth, St. Cloud, Rochester, and Minneapolis and Hennepin County are members of the network, along with a lot of other small towns. So aligning with all these communities. Also, it's access to the resources. So if communities are wondering about how can we improve our housing affordability and accessibility, how can we provide better mobility and transportation services for people, we have some answers and some options, and we can learn from the rest of the network where other communities across the country are also tackling these issues. So that talking about the benefits of joining is one thing, but sure, what are the hard questions that a resident who goes to their city council might be asked? How much is this going to cost is the first one. And so there's no fee or charge for enrolling. Certainly as the community starts understanding the issues that they want to solve, and those solutions might come with a price tag, but guess what? Those problems are there before anyone understands what they understand because they've joined the network. So sure, but about 35 to 40% of these communities, once they join the network, they gain private investment, so they qualify for grants. Like I mentioned, the state of Minnesota and AARP has grant money available that is not exclusive to members in our network, but is there to fund these projects that are aligned with our goals and with the state of Minnesota's goals. So that's the story about money. A lot of the issue has to do with another common question is how we don't have the staff time to dedicate to running through this type of a process. And it doesn't have to be city staff who operate it. We've already talked at length about residents themselves taking the lead. There are volunteers on all of these age-friendly committees. And then many of them are led by nonprofit organizations that are focused on community development in those places. So I'm not trying to say every community in the state of Minnesota needs to join the network just for the sake of doing it. But if they are looking for a process to follow, a framework, if they're looking for access to the network of other communities, if they are looking for the resources that can help them achieve the goals that they have already identified, this is one way that they can team up with us and start to work on those.
And so this is another way, if people, viewers who are tuned into the program, are looking for opportunities or reasons to get engaged with their communities, this is a great way to do it.
Right, and it's very flexible and open-ended. So I often say the decisions in these age-friendly communities get made by the people who are at the table. So the assessment and the community members are going to identify issues, but also the people who are participating are the ones who make the decision about whether they're going to focus on pedestrian safety issues or vehicle transportation issues, or the real housing crisis we have in our state, in the Twin Cities, in small towns and in regional centers where people can't afford their homes, they can't find the appropriate type of home. We need more housing options in Minnesota, and so we're very much moving in that direction to change policies at local levels and give people more choice and access to the type of housing that they need and want.
So Jay, one of the things that AARP uses as a leverage and to help them be more successful and wider ranging in what they're able to accomplish, they partner with many different organizations depending upon what the initiative is or what the subject is that they're working on. What organizations is AARP either locally here in Minnesota or nationally partnering with on this initiative?
Yeah, thanks for that question, because another one of those questions that we get from community members and leaders is how this is an aging services issue. It ought to be in the aging services department of a government unit. And that aging services ought to be involved along with healthcare, but this is about an approach to our communities that goes across different sectors. It's the Transportation and Public Works Department. It's the Parks and Recreation Department. It's how all of these governments and communities are serving their older residents. And help me out with the last part of it.
Which was specific organizations that you may be partnering with, locally and nationally.
It's very broad. So in these local communities, it's the transportation departments, it's the nonprofit community development, it's the economic development. It's often the Chamber of Commerce and the Economic Development Authority, because they recognize that their older residents are very important to the local economy. It's higher education. It's public health departments at the county and in other levels of government. So it's really, really across the board. And you're right, AARP's model is really to support and uplift other organizations that are working toward common goals with us.
Well, that's great. Jay, we're going to be wrapping up here in a few minutes. Are there other issues or other corollaries to this initiative that AARP has with Livable Communities that you'd like to share with our viewers?
The one that really comes to mind has to do with high-speed internet access.
Yeah.
So, and which is part of, it's very important to a local community that wants to retain its residents, wants to attract new residents, wants to attract new businesses. They need to have, in 2024, they need to have high-speed internet connection for those homes and businesses in their community. And what has happened through the Infrastructure and Jobs Act is Minnesota has received hundreds of millions of dollars for expansion of that infrastructure. But along with that, these once-in-a-lifetime investments in our broadband infrastructure have come with funding for training for people to use internet-connected devices, and also for people to get access to devices. So if you don't have a laptop computer, if you don't have a smartphone to stay connected with our world today, that's what this federal funding is going to do. And it will happen in the summer of 2024, where Minnesota's Digital Opportunity Plan will be enacted with grants going to local communities. Now, all of this funding is tied to target audiences, including different cultural groups, rural communities. You can imagine that where we lack infrastructure for high-speed internet connection is in those rural areas at the end of the road where only a few homes are, and also in our lower income neighborhoods. But that's what this federal funding comes with, is a mandate that the internet service providers expand in those strategic places and ways and are inclusive of older adults. So, and age-friendly communities can work on those issues. In fact, many of your viewers may already be a part of their local digital connection committee that were facilitated by the state to help decide how that funding on the broadband infrastructure and devices and training gets spent in communities across the state.
I think many of us didn't realize this huge gap in the broadband availability until we had the quarantine with COVID, and the students couldn't go to school and people couldn't go to work and they had to do things online. We heard students of having to go down to the local McDonald's to get access to the internet because there was no broadband for them where they lived. So this is a really important aspect of what livable communities throughout the state, throughout the nation, throughout the world, that's one example of some of the challenges that we're facing.
Yes, and I'll say I've heard from a handful of people who say, well, I don't use the internet at home and I'm not going to take advantage of this opportunity to get better internet connection at my house. Please take advantage of it, because even if you're not going to use it today, when you sell your house, the people who buy it are going to want it. So now it's going to be an important chance.
And there you've heard it, folks, from Jay Haapala from AARP. Before we say goodbye to Jay, I'm going to do something I don't ordinarily do, which is to put in a little plug for the program that I'm going to have next week, when one of the themes we're going to be talking about is Future City. And we'll have a coordinator for the program from the state, a teacher who helps shepherd some of the students in her class in this particular project, and a student who's going to bring their project, their model city, to the program and share that with us. So Jay, thank you so much for being a guest on Access to Democracy. Really appreciate what you've shared with us, what you do and what AARP does for people of all ages. And all ethnicities and all DEI, right?
Yes, that's us.
Again, thanks for watching us on Access to Democracy. I'm Bill Raker. Our other programs, if you've missed them, are on accesstodemocracy.com. Thanks for watching.